A little mouse squeaks frantically as she calls out to the mysterious figure before her. The mouse searches desperately around the dimly lit room, her tiny voice echoing as she announces that Mr. Human must be somewhere nearby, because she knows he is here in this very space. The small creature's whiskers twitch with nervous energy as she finally spots the tall figure standing in the shadows. The mouse bounces excitedly on her tiny paws as she greets the man with genuine warmth, explaining that she has traveled a great distance to find him because she carries an important wish that only he can help fulfill. Her small voice trembles with hope and desperation as she speaks. The mouse takes a deep breath and jumps up dramatically, her tiny arms spread wide as she declares that Cinderella desperately wants to attend the grand royal ball that everyone in the kingdom has been talking about for weeks. The mouse's expression grows somber as she explains the unfortunate reality of the situation. Cinderella currently has no proper shoes to wear on her feet and no beautiful dress to grace her body for such an elegant occasion. The man tilts his head curiously and asks in a calm voice what exactly the mouse expects him to do about this particular predicament that seems quite challenging to resolve. His eyes study the small creature with a mixture of amusement and genuine interest. The mouse's tiny face crumples into the most pitiful and teary expression imaginable, her small eyes filling with glistening tears that threaten to spill down her furry cheeks. Seeing this heartbreaking display, the man lets out a heavy sigh and says with resignation that it's okay. He supposes he will help her with whatever she needs, though he's not entirely sure how. The mouse's ears perk up with sudden confusion as she asks with genuine bewilderment whether he is really and truly a fairy godmother like the one she has heard about in all the old stories. Her small head tilts to one side as she awaits his response. The man responds with his own confusion, asking why on earth she would call him by such a title as godmother. He gestures to himself and asks whether he actually looks like a fairy to her small eyes, because he certainly doesn't feel like one at all. The mouse tilts her head even further to the other side and says with innocent logic that isn't he exactly that though. She points out that he has beautiful white hair that sparkles in the light, plus he just granted her wish to help Cinderella, so by all reasonable fairy tale logic, he must be the fairy godmother she was looking for. The mouse asks earnestly whether he understands what she's saying, because it seems perfectly obvious to her. The man looks at the small creature with deep concern etched across his features, but after a moment he laughs softly and says with gentle amusement that they should just say yes to keep things simple. He then asks what exactly is going on in this situation that has brought them together. The mouse's expression becomes dreamy and romantic as she explains that Cinderella is completely and utterly in love with someone special. She sighs wistfully and adds that Cinderella loves the handsome prince with every fiber of her being, more than anything else in the entire world. The man asks simply what else there is to this story, waiting for more details about the complicated situation. The mouse's face grows worried as she explains that she thinks it's very likely that Cinderella's cruel stepmother and her two awful stepsisters will definitely interfere with any plans for happiness. The mouse wrings her tiny paws together nervously as she addresses him as fair godmother, asking what they should do in times like these when evil people try to ruin everything good. The man suggests with casual indifference that perhaps they could simply get rid of the troublesome family members entirely, solving the problem once and for all. The mouse jumps back in complete shock and horror, her tiny voice rising to a squeak as she exclaims that no, absolutely not, that's definitely not what she meant at all, fairy godmother. Her small body trembles with fear at the suggestion. The man quickly apologizes, explaining that he's sorry for the suggestion, but it was honestly the only solution that immediately occurred to his mind when thinking about the problem. The mouse's expression brightens suddenly as she announces that in fact, something much better has just occurred to her brilliant little mind. Her whiskers twitch with excitement as she prepares to share her idea. The man nods approvingly and says that he'll definitely listen to whatever great plan she has come up with, since she seems quite clever for such a small creature. The scene dramatically cuts to show the mouse carefully peeking around a large stone pillar, watching the grand festivities unfold before her tiny eyes. Joyful cheers ring out across the magnificent ballroom as the gathered crowd enthusiastically shouts congratulations to the prince and princess, celebrating their beautiful marriage with loud voices and clapping hands. The ornate decorations sparkle under the chandelier light as people dance and celebrate. The mouse perches proudly on Cinderella's delicate shoulder, her small face beaming with a bright smile that matches the happiness radiating from all the people around them who declare that the two newlyweds look absolutely perfect together, like they were meant to be. The crowd calls out their heartfelt wishes for the couple to be happy forever and always, their voices echoing through the grand palace halls with genuine warmth and celebration. 10 long years pass by slowly, and the scene shifts dramatically to show a much different reality than the fairy tale ending everyone expected. The prince now looks terribly weak and frail, his once strong body reduced to a shadow of its former self as a cruel maid stands nearby, laughing coldly at his pathetic condition with obvious malicious pleasure. The mouse asks the fairy godmother with a voice heavy with sadness and disappointment how long forever is actually supposed to last, because she has come to believe that forever ended a very long time ago for poor Cinderella. The mouse continues with growing despair, saying that it's probably already far too late to change anything now, because Cinderella is too old and worn down by years of suffering and neglect. The man gently picks up the tiny mouse in his large hands as she speaks with a breaking heart, calling him fairy godmother and admitting that she knows she used to be nothing more than a disgusting rat living in the walls and shadows. The mouse's voice grows tender as she remembers that Cinderella was such a wonderfully affectionate girl who always hugged her very warmly, treating even a lowly rat with kindness and genuine love that touched her small heart deeply. The mouse's eyes fill with tears as she speaks about that special girl, saying that Cinderella really and truly wanted everyone around her to be happy, and that pure wish was what made her so special and beautiful. The mouse whispers that she wishes desperately that she could see Cinderella's genuine smile just one more time, because it was the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed in her entire life. The man asks gently if that is truly her very last wish in this world, his voice carrying the weight of finality and deep sadness. The mouse realizes with growing despair that in the end, Cinderella couldn't say anything else meaningful, much less express that she didn't want to die alone and forgotten in that cold palace. The mouse reflects with bitter regret that with just one word, maybe somehow the fairy godmother might have been able to save Cinderella from the terrible curse that had befallen her life. The man explains solemnly that only that special girl can free the mouse from the curse that has been cruelly placed upon her small form, because true love's magic works in mysterious ways. The man promises that he will grant her final wish, but warns that in her next life she will always have to remain in the places where the warm sun shines brightly, never lingering in darkness. The man's voice grows heavy with sorrow as he asks her to please never meet someone like him again, because he knows his presence brings nothing but pain and tragedy to those around him. The mouse looks at her tiny reflection in a nearby mirror, her small face filled with complete confusion as she asks herself why on earth she has somehow gone back 15 whole years into the past. The mouse admits that it's incredibly strange and makes no logical sense, but this unexpected turn of events is actually great news because now she can meet her beloved Cinderella again before the innocent girl ever encounters the prince who will ultimately cause her so much pain. The mouse realizes with growing excitement that besides having this second chance, she knows that with a kiss of true love, the terrible curse that binds her will finally be broken completely. The mouse undergoes a magical transformation, turning from a small rodent into a cute human girl with distinctive rat features, throwing her arms wide as she exclaims with pure joy that she now looks like a real person, which is honestly quite strange and wonderful. Cinderella asks with innocent curiosity why this new person has adorable mouse ears perched on her head and a long tail swishing behind her, because it seems quite unusual for a human. The mouse girl declares proudly that she has become completely human now, explaining that originally she was not just a wild field rat but actually a magical beast of the field with special powers and abilities. The transformed mouse hugs Cinderella tightly as she thinks determinedly to herself that she absolutely will not let Cinderella go through all that terrible suffering again, not if she has any power to prevent it. The mouse girl reveals with confidence that she's actually super rich now and possesses amazing skills that will help them both, because her magical transformation has granted her incredible abilities. The mouse girl tells Cinderella earnestly to please never say the word forever again, because she promises that she will make Cinderella genuinely happy for the rest of her natural life, no matter what obstacles they face. A weird and mysterious aura begins to fill the entire room with an otherworldly energy as the rat girl opens the heavy wooden door, looking around in complete confusion as she calls out to the fairy godmother. The transformed rat announces with growing excitement that today is the very day of the magnificent ball being held at the Grand Royal Palace, where all the nobility and important people of the kingdom will gather. With the magical help of her mysterious fairy godmother, the kind and beautiful Cinderella was able to attend the spectacular ball, wearing an enchanted gown that sparkled like starlight and glass slippers that fit her feet perfectly. But the joyful time passed far too quickly, and as midnight approached, the exact time when all the powerful magic would completely wear off, Cinderella hurried frantically out of the enormous castle, her heart pounding with panic. In her desperate haste to escape before the spell broke, Cinderella accidentally left behind one of her precious glass slippers on the marble steps of the palace, the delicate shoe glinting in the moonlight. The handsome prince could absolutely not forget the mysterious and breathtakingly beautiful young lady who had appeared at his ball like a vision and then vanished, leaving behind just one glass slipper as proof she had ever existed. So the determined prince searched every single corner of the village with unwavering dedication, going door to door to find the enchanting girl who had completely stolen his heart with her grace and beauty. And at last, after many long days of searching, he found the true owner of the delicate glass slipper, and so Cinderella married the prince in a ceremony that the entire kingdom celebrated with great joy. The couple was supposed to live happily ever after for a very, very long time, forever, in fact, but the fairy godmother notices that these days Cinderella doesn't seem happy at all, despite living in luxury. In the grandest and most splendid room in the entire world, decorated with the finest silks and most precious jewels money can buy, Cinderella falls asleep every single night completely exhausted from crying alone in her gilded cage. At some point during their marriage, even the prince stopped looking for her when she disappeared into the vast palace, no longer caring where she spent her lonely hours or what made her so sad. Though he brought her into the palace with his own hands, treating her like a precious treasure, he eventually locked her away from the world, and now she wonders if it's because Cinderella is no longer the mysterious girl who captured his imagination. The mouse wonders sadly if Cinderella is no longer lovable in the prince's eyes, if familiarity has bred contempt and boredom where once there was passionate love and devotion. Today marks the day that Cinderella is being cast out of this palace that has felt like nothing more than a beautiful prison for so many years, the golden bars of her cage finally opening. The cruel courtiers say it's because she couldn't bear the prince a child, which they claim makes her worthless as a wife and princess, though she tried desperately for years. 10 long, difficult years have passed since their wedding day. Their supposedly happily ever after lasted not even a full decade before crumbling into dust and bitter disappointment. The mouse asks the fairy godmother with a voice full of despair what they should do now that everything has fallen apart so completely and there seems to be no hope left. The mouse reflects with deep regret that if she had known that the brief, fleeting happiness Cinderella once felt would be the very last joy in her entire life, she would have ruined that wedding even if it meant being crushed to death under the weight of her actions. But now the mouse supposes with growing sorrow that it's far too late to change anything, because too much time has passed and too much damage has been done to ever repair. The mouse observes that Cinderella is far too old now, her body worn down by years of sadness, and she can't walk or run like she used to when she was young and full of hope. Cinderella doesn't even have the physical strength to lift herself up anymore. Her spirit is broken as her body after enduring years of emotional neglect and isolation. The mouse looks up toward the sky with tears in her tiny eyes, addressing the fairy godmother as she says there's one last thing she wishes for with all her heart. Just once, even if it's only once, the mouse hopes desperately that Cinderella can smile again with genuine happiness, the way she used to when she was young and believed in love. The mouse remembers wistfully that even though Cinderella had absolutely nothing material back then, living as a servant in her own home, in those precious moments when she smiled it felt like she owned the whole world. The man asks with gentle sadness if that's truly her final wish, noting that even now, after everything that has happened, she still wishes only for Cinderella's happiness above all else. The mouse calls out urgently to the human, saying that she has a wish too, one that burns in her small heart with desperate intensity. The mouse expresses her deepest desire that Cinderella may forever be genuinely happy, free from the pain and sorrow that has defined her recent years. The man observes that the mouse remains as unwavering as always in her devotion, never thinking of herself but only of the girl she loves so dearly. The man reflects sadly that if only just once, Cinderella had said she wanted to live, if she had expressed that desire, he would have done absolutely anything within his considerable power to help her. The man explains with heavy resignation that Cinderella's curse can only be broken by that special girl herself, because she's the one the mouse loved with all her heart, and true love's magic requires the participation of both souls. The man wonders aloud if Cinderella smiles again, would the mouse be able to smile too, since their fates seem so mysteriously intertwined by the bonds of love and magic. The man stands there in complete silence for a long moment before gently lifting the tiny mouse with his magical powers, his movements careful and reverent as he prepares to grant her wish. The man speaks solemnly as he uses his magic, saying that in her next life, may she always stay in places where the warm sun shines brightly, bringing light and joy to her existence. He adds with deep sincerity that she'll never have to meet someone like him again, someone who brings darkness and tragedy wherever he goes, disrupting the natural order of happiness. The mouse finds herself thinking about a hauntingly beautiful song that fills her small heart with bittersweet memories, recognizing it as such a dearly missed melody from happier times. She remembers Cinderella's gentle voice singing this very song, so pure and sweet that it seemed to make the whole world a little brighter just by existing. The mouse recalls how Cinderella used to hum this lovely melody while sharing her meager food with all the small creatures around her, never keeping anything just for herself. The mouse realizes with surprise that this experience isn't nearly as bad as she had originally thought it would be, finding unexpected peace in these final moments. The mouse says to herself with wonder that who knew death could actually feel so incredibly peaceful and calm, like drifting off to the most restful sleep imaginable. Suddenly, the harsh voice of the stepsister cuts through the peaceful moment like a knife, yelling out Cinderella's name with obvious irritation and anger. The mouse jumps dramatically out of the flower petal where she had been resting as the stepsister's voice continues, demanding to know if Cinderella even knows what time it is. The stepsister calls Cinderella lazy and good for nothing as always, her voice dripping with the familiar cruelty that the mouse remembers all too well from years past. The mouse chuckles quietly to herself in disbelief, asking what strange twist of fate has occurred here before her very eyes. The mouse wonders with growing confusion if she has somehow ended up in hell instead of heaven, because surely that must be the explanation for what's happening. The mouse decides that must be exactly what happened, because otherwise, how could she possibly be hearing the awful, familiar voices of Cinderella's cruel stepsisters echoing in her ears? Cinderella appears and plays gently with the small mouse, her voice soft and kind as she says with surprise that the little creature looks quite startled by something. The mouse feels completely shocked as she recognizes the voice and cries out the name Sarah, hardly believing what her small ears are hearing. The stepsister's voice booms out harshly, calling for Cinderella with impatience and barely contained anger at being kept waiting. Cinderella responds immediately with practiced obedience, saying yes and that she's coming right away, sister, her voice carrying the familiar note of fear and submission. The mouse thinks frantically to herself that there's absolutely no way this can be real, asking why Sarah is here in this place and time. The mouse's mind races as she considers the completely unbelievable situation unfolding before her eyes, telling herself not to believe what seems impossible. The mouse knows intellectually that it doesn't make any logical sense, but she can't deny the evidence of her own senses as she stares at the familiar scene. The mouse studies Cinderella's face carefully, noting every detail as she tries to understand what's happening to them both. The mouse jumps down from her perch and begins chasing after Cinderella, her small legs working furiously as she observes that the voices are far too vivid and realistic to be just a dream. The cruel stepsister screams that Cinderella is late again, calling her a filthy wretch with the same venom the mouse remembers from the past. Cinderella responds with automatic apology, saying she's sorry and that she'll get ready right away, her voice small and defeated. One stepsister makes a disgusted sound and asks what this mess is, complaining that Cinderella didn't even wash herself properly before appearing. The other stepsister joins in with cruel laughter, asking why there's suddenly such a fuss now about Cinderella's appearance when everyone knows her situation. The second stepsister explains mockingly that Cinderella's nickname exists precisely because she's always covered in ashes and filth from her work, making cleanliness impossible. The mouse thinks to herself with growing certainty that it really does feel like she has somehow gone back to the distant past, to a time she remembers all too well. The mouse recalls that even back then, the stepfamily used to call Cinderella by those same cruel names, never showing her any kindness or respect. The mouse remembers sadly that even though Cinderella had a proper, beautiful name, Seraphina Bluewood, her family refused to use it, preferring their insulting nickname. Cinderella trembles visibly under the harsh treatment as the mouse continues to observe and think about their situation. The mouse wonders to herself if this incredible turn of events is also the result of the fairy godmother's powerful magic, trying to make sense of the impossible. If this really and truly is the Bluewood estate from the past, and the fairy godmother has actually managed to turn back time itself, then the implications are staggering. The mouse realizes with growing excitement that if she has truly been given another precious chance to protect Sarah, she won't waste this opportunity. The sound of the father tapping impatiently on the wooden table interrupts the mouse's thoughts as he complains about how noisy everyone is being. The mouse recognizes that terrible voice immediately. It belongs to the Count of Bluewood, Sarah's biological father who never once protected his own daughter from abuse. The mouse thinks with burning anger that this man is nothing but the worst kind of trash, a father who failed completely in his most basic duty. The mouse remembers with fury that after Cinderella married the prince, unlike the stepmother and stepsisters who were eventually punished for their cruelty, this man clung to the family's newfound glory. The count lived well until his natural death, never paying for any of his sins or facing justice for his treatment of his own daughter. The mouse realizes that this worthless father lived comfortably off what he gained from essentially offering Sarah to the prince like a piece of property to be traded. The mouse thinks with deep conviction that if it hadn't been for that selfish man's actions, Sarah might not have ended up so desperately unhappy in her later life. The father addresses Cinderella directly with cold authority, his voice carrying the weight of absolute power over her young life. Cinderella responds immediately with a simple yes, her voice automatically respectful despite the fear she must be feeling. The father tells her harshly that she shouldn't talk back to her sister, and that she needs to learn proper obedience to her betters. The father adds with disgusting cruelty that he's ashamed to think he fathered such a completely worthless child, his words designed to cut deep into her heart. Cinderella's eyes begin to fill with tears as she struggles to contain her emotional response to his brutal words. The mouse observes with protective anger that Sarah was so incredibly young at this time in their shared past. The mouse realizes that no matter how quickly Cinderella had been forced to mature due to her circumstances, at this particular point in time, Sarah was still just a little girl who needed love and protection. The mouse understands now why Cinderella clung so desperately to that prince, who only looked good on the outside but was rotten within. The mouse realizes that aside from the prince's false kindness, absolutely no one else ever reached out a helping hand to the lonely, abused girl. Cinderella whispers that she's sorry, her voice barely audible as she tries to appease the anger surrounding her. The mouse feels her fury building to an explosive level as she thinks to herself that whether in the past or now, she may be nothing but a lowly rat in most people's eyes. The mouse makes a fierce determination that even if she dies trying, she will protect Cinderella from this abuse and cruelty. The mouse suddenly jumps up onto the wooden table with surprising agility and courage, her small body trembling with righteous anger. The mouse launches herself directly at the startled father, her tiny claws extended as she declares her intention to fight for justice. The father recoils in complete shock and terror, asking what this creature thinks it's doing as he stumbles backward. The mouse bites down hard on the father's nose with all the strength in her small body, declaring that she will never, ever forgive him for his cruelty. The father lets out a tremendous scream of pain and surprise as he realizes he's being attacked by what appears to be just a tiny mouse with the heart of a lion. The father lets out a piercing, dramatic scream that echoes throughout the entire grand room as the shocked family members gasp and exclaim "Oh my goodness" in complete fear and horror at the unexpected scene unfolding before their very eyes. He continues screaming even louder as the tiny mouse thinks to herself with bitter amusement that getting bitten by such a small rat like herself wouldn't even tickle a normal person, and what an absolute drama queen this pathetic man is being about such a minor injury. The father wails dramatically and declares that it hurts terribly, repeating over and over again that he said it hurts so much, as if anyone within miles couldn't already hear his excessive complaints and theatrical moaning. The stepmother demands to know why everyone is just standing there like useless statues instead of taking action, ordering them to get that absolutely nasty thing off him immediately before it does even more damage to his precious person. The nervous servant responds with a quick "yes ma'am" and moves forward to help, ready to follow the stepmother's harsh commands without question or hesitation. Cinderella suddenly calls out desperately, begging them to wait and not do anything rash that might hurt the small creature who was only trying to defend her from cruelty. The father continues his dramatic screaming and wailing as Cinderella desperately tries to stop the servants, telling them please not to do this terrible thing and not to be so unnecessarily cruel to an innocent animal. She promises with genuine sincerity that she'll get the tiny mouse off her father herself, using gentle hands instead of violence, if they'll just give her the chance to handle the situation properly. The mouse thinks frantically to herself about sweet Sarah and realizes with growing horror that she's definitely going to get hurt trying to protect a worthless creature like herself from the family's wrath. The servant grabs Cinderella's delicate hand roughly and tells her to move out of the way immediately so he can deal with this problem in his own brutal fashion. Cinderella lets out a startled cry of pain and surprise as the servant forces her aside, her voice echoing with genuine distress at the rough treatment she's receiving. The mouse cries out desperately, calling Sarah's name as she realizes the danger her beloved friend is now facing because of her reckless actions. The servant announces triumphantly that he's got the troublesome creature as he grabs the tiny mouse in his large, callous hands with obvious malicious intent. He smashes the small, helpless creature down onto the hard ground with unnecessary force as he declares with disgust that it's nothing but a filthy little rat that deserves this treatment. Cinderella screams out in horror and anguish, crying no over and over again as she watches the violent scene unfold before her tear-filled eyes. She keeps repeating no with increasing desperation, saying that this absolutely cannot be happening and that this level of violence was completely unnecessary and excessive. Cinderella declares through her tears that he didn't have to throw the poor creature like that with such force, asking why anyone would be so needlessly cruel to such a tiny, defenseless animal. The father yells at his daughter with tremendous anger, telling her to shut her mouth immediately because he cannot believe she is seriously defending that filthy rat that had the audacity to attack him. The father demands to know if she has completely lost her mind and gone totally insane to be taking the side of a disgusting rodent over her own family. Cinderella responds with passionate conviction that the mouse is not filthy at all, explaining that it's actually a clean meadow mouse that lives peacefully in a pristine flower field far from here. She points out logically that he would never find one of those special creatures in a fancy mansion like this one, because they prefer the natural beauty of wildflower meadows. The stepmother approaches from behind with obvious fury and grabs Cinderella's long hair roughly, exclaiming with outrage, "What did she just hear from this ungrateful girl?" The stepmother shouts the full name Seraphina Bluewood with venom dripping from every syllable as she uses the formal name to emphasize her disappointment and anger. Cinderella exclaims in genuine pain as her stepmother's grip tightens painfully on her delicate hair, pulling at her scalp with deliberate cruelty. The stepmother continues her tirade, saying with complete disgust that cuddling a filthy rat like some kind of pet shows that Cinderella has definitely lost her mind completely. She declares that her stepdaughter has gone completely mad and is no longer thinking rationally about anything, which explains this bizarre behavior with wild animals. Cinderella trembles visibly with fear and distress as she stutters out the word mother, her voice shaking with genuine terror at the punishment she knows is coming. The stepmother pulls her roughly by her hair, dragging her across the room as she commands her to come along immediately for the punishment she so richly deserves. Cinderella pleads desperately, saying she's truly sorry and begging her stepmother to please forgive her for this terrible mistake that she never meant to make. One of the stepsisters asks with fake concern if their father is okay after his traumatic ordeal with the vicious rat attack that could have been much worse. The other stepsister responds with mock sympathy, saying what a poor thing Cinderella is because she's definitely going to get punished again for her latest act of rebellion. The stepmother shoves Cinderella roughly toward a small, dark storage room and commands her to go count grain over there while thinking very hard about what she has done wrong. The stepmother declares that Cinderella is absolutely not coming out of that cramped space until she realizes the full extent of what she has done and feels proper remorse. The stepmother slams the heavy wooden door shut with a loud bang as Cinderella repeatedly calls out to her, saying she's sorry and pleading for her to open the door. Cinderella continues begging through the locked door, crying please mother and asking her to reconsider this harsh punishment that seems so extreme for such a small offense. The injured mouse lets out weak, pained noises from where she lies broken on the cold floor, barely clinging to life after the servant's brutal attack. Cinderella thinks desperately to herself, wondering what on earth she's supposed to do with this badly injured little creature who clearly needs immediate medical attention. She realizes with growing despair that the tiny mouse won't survive much longer without a proper healing potion, but she has no access to such expensive magical remedies. Cinderella wants desperately to save the small creature's life, but she can't even manage to get herself out of this locked storeroom on her own, so what could she possibly do to help? Cinderella begins to tear up as she apologizes repeatedly to the mouse, saying she's very sorry for getting them both into this terrible situation. She asks herself with bitter self-recrimination why she's always so pathetically weak when people she cares about need her strength and protection the most. The mouse thinks to herself, trying to communicate that Sarah shouldn't blame herself for any of this mess, because she's the one who ran out without thinking things through properly. The mouse reflects sadly that even back in their shared past, she couldn't properly comfort Cinderella or wipe away her tears when she needed support the most. The mouse realizes with growing despair that she was just a completely useless little mouse then, and apparently nothing has changed since that time despite this second chance. The mouse keeps on squeaking weakly as Cinderella asks with gentle curiosity if she's trying to comfort her even in her injured state, thanking her for the kindness. The mouse thinks to herself that even now, after everything that's happened, Cinderella's fundamental kindness toward all creatures hasn't changed even slightly. The mouse remembers that this exact kindness has always been what saves her from complete despair, giving her hope when everything seems darkest and most hopeless. Cinderella says with genuine warmth that she thinks they could definitely be really good friends if given the chance, despite the difficult circumstances of their first meeting. The mouse thinks bitterly to herself that even though Cinderella is so incredibly kind and said such beautiful words, she still ended up making her cry anyway. The mouse wonders with frustration about that mysterious fairy godmother, asking why he even bothered to send her back in time if she still can't do anything meaningful to help. Cinderella suddenly brightens up and says with genuine appreciation that she wants to thank the mouse for what happened earlier, because it was actually quite satisfying to witness. She admits with a small smile that, to be completely honest, it felt kind of good to see someone finally stand up to her father's cruelty for once. Cinderella confesses that she has never seen her dad scream like that before in her entire life, and there was something deeply satisfying about witnessing his shock and fear. She asks the mouse directly if when she bit her dad's nose with such determination, she got angry for Cinderella's sake and was trying to defend her honor. Cinderella declares with admiration that the tiny mouse is incredibly brave, displaying more courage than most humans she knows in her daily life. She says that the mouse reminds her exactly of the brave mouse from her favorite adventure story that she used to read when she was younger and still believed in heroes. Cinderella explains that since the mouse is such a genuinely brave creature, she wants to give her a special name that reflects her courageous spirit and noble heart. Cinderella tilts her head thoughtfully and says she wants to give the mouse a proper name, asking if it would be okay if she called her Elodie from now on. The mouse almost tears up as she thinks to herself about all the terrible names she's been called throughout her life by cruel humans who saw her as nothing but vermin. She remembers being called filthy rat, disgusting rat, pathetic rat, and being treated exactly the same way by every single human she has ever encountered in her long existence. The mouse reflects that every human has treated her with disgust and contempt, except for one person, Sarah, who has always been different from all the others. The mouse realizes that Sarah is the only person who has ever reached out to her with genuine kindness, treating her like she has value and worth as a living creature. The mouse thinks about how her worthless squeaks that mean absolutely nothing to anyone else in the world, Sarah calls them brave and meaningful. The mouse makes a fierce determination that she won't give up on protecting Sarah, no matter what obstacles they face or how impossible the situation seems. The mouse promises herself that no matter what happens, she'll find a way to protect the kind girl who showed her love when no one else would. As Cinderella gently kisses the injured mouse with tender care, a magical transformation begins to occur that changes everything between them completely. The mouse suddenly turns into a little girl with distinctive mouse features as Cinderella thinks to herself that this is absolutely no way this can be real. Cinderella stares in complete shock at the transformation happening right before her very eyes, hardly able to believe what she's witnessing in this small storage room. The scene dramatically cuts to show the father yelling out frantically, demanding to know when the healer is finally coming to treat his supposedly serious injuries. The father curses angrily and wonders what will happen if he caught some kind of terrible disease from that disgusting rat bite that could spread throughout his body. He complains that his throat is starting to itch terribly too, which must be a sign that the infection is already spreading through his system rapidly. The father stands confused near the large glass window when something heavy suddenly crashes into it from outside, making him jump back in terror and surprise. The whole window explodes into thousands of glittering pieces as the father leaps backward and shouts what the hell is happening to his peaceful home. He looks out through the broken window and sees with growing horror that his beautiful, carefully maintained garden has been completely destroyed and exploded into chaos. The father gets extremely pissed off and thinks furiously to himself about what complete lunatic would dare to do this kind of extensive damage to his expensive garden. He looks out the window with a startled expression and thinks with growing fear that the person responsible might be the legendary beast Duke Valkyrzin himself. The butler rushes in breathlessly and announces urgently that, "My lord, this is an emergency situation that requires immediate attention and action from the count." The butler explains that Duke Valkyrzin and the young master have arrived at their estate unexpectedly and are demanding immediate audience with the head of the household. The father asks with obvious distress why that freak who spends all his time hanging around non-humans would be storming into his peaceful estate right now. The Duke speaks with calm authority, addressing the Count by his first name Edmund, which immediately gets his full attention despite his fear and confusion. Edmund responds nervously with a simple yes, clearly intimidated by the powerful presence of the Duke and unsure what this unexpected visit could mean. The Duke continues speaking with measured authority, telling Count Bluewood that he may be surprised by this visit, but he needs to listen very carefully to what comes next. The Duke explains that they are here for one reason only, and that reason involves something that has happened recently on the Bluewood estate. Cinderella whispers in complete disbelief that there's no way it can be her, hardly able to process what she's hearing from the conversation outside. The young master Edmund speaks with cold authority, saying that he will give the Count exactly 10 minutes to return the beast-kin child that he has kidnapped unlawfully. Cinderella stares at Elodie's new human form with growing amazement, trying to understand the incredible transformation that has just taken place before her eyes. Edmund repeats his ultimatum with growing impatience, saying that he'll give the Count exactly 10 minutes to return the beast-kin child that he has unlawfully kidnapped from her rightful home. The father exclaims with genuine shock and outrage, asking if they are seriously accusing him of kidnapping a beast-kin when he has never even seen such creatures. He declares with indignation that they are trespassing on his private property and spouting complete nonsense without any evidence to support their wild accusations. The father demands to know if they really think they can just barge into his home without a single shred of proof to back up their serious criminal allegations. The Duke responds calmly to Edmund, saying that if it's proof the Count wants, they'll be more than happy to provide exactly what he's asking for. Edmund uses his powerful magic and explains that this specially enchanted magical orb indicates the precise location of the only daughter of the Ratsun family, a harvest mouse beastkin. He continues explaining that until very recently, Lady Ratsun was considered missing due to a mysterious curse that concealed her whereabouts from all detection methods. Edmund says that they were completely unable to determine her location using any magical or conventional means for an extended period of time. However, Edmund announces that just 1 minute ago, the magical orb suddenly activated for reasons that are still unknown, revealing her exact location for the first time. The magical detection has pinpointed her presence right here at the Bluewood estate, which explains why they have come with such urgency and determination. The father gets visibly startled by this revelation as Edmund begins counting down, saying he'll give the Count one final warning before taking more drastic action. The Duke interjects calmly, telling Edmund that's quite enough of the countdown, because if the Count insists on playing innocent, they'll have no choice but to proceed by force. The Duke begins gathering his magical power and asks what the Count's decision will be, making it clear that time is running out for a peaceful resolution. The father thinks frantically to himself, damn it, recognizing that this is extremely dangerous explosion magic that could level his entire estate in seconds. He was always told that beastkin never step foot outside their own protected lands, so there should be no way those creatures would be anywhere near his estate. The father reasons that his estate is right in the heart of the capital city, far from the borderlands where such creatures might occasionally be found. He thinks with disgust that a rat beastkin of all things would be the most unlikely creature to find here, since rats are creatures he personally despises above all others. The father convinces himself that there are absolutely no beastkin in his estate, let alone a filthy rat creature that he would never knowingly allow inside. The father suddenly stops his internal rant and thinks, wait just 1 second, remembering something important about a harvest mouse beastkin specifically. He recalls Cinderella saying earlier that the mouse wasn't dirty at all, but was actually a harvest mouse that lived in clean flower fields. The father remembers that she said the creature lived and ate in a pristine flower bed, which matches exactly what Edmund just described about the missing beastkin. The father thinks with growing horror that it could actually be that damn rat that attacked him, realizing the serious implications if this is true. The father calls out desperately, asking them to wait and saying there must be some kind of terrible misunderstanding about the situation at his estate. He points out that as they can clearly see, his estate is so well managed and secure that it's extremely difficult for even a single mouse to get inside. The father promises that he'll have the entire estate searched thoroughly just in case, though he's certain they won't find anything suspicious or illegal. The father looks urgently at his butler Alfred and asks where that damn rat went after the incident, needing to locate it immediately. Alfred responds with confusion, asking what rat he's referring to since there are no rats that he knows of currently on the estate premises. The father clarifies that he means the specific one that his worthless daughter Cinderella was protecting so fiercely during the earlier confrontation. Alfred says with understanding that if he means that particular mouse, Lady Seraphina was holding onto it protectively until the very end of the incident. The father exclaims excellent news and orders Alfred to go immediately and check if the creature is still alive after the servant's brutal treatment. The father adds with deadly seriousness that if the mouse is still breathing, Alfred must kill it on the spot without hesitation or mercy. Alfred asks with confusion if the Count doesn't mean that he should treat the creature's wounds instead of killing it, since it seemed badly injured. The father asks if Alfred truly doesn't understand why the Valkyries ducal house is called the King of Beasts by everyone in the kingdom. He explains that even with the current peace treaty between humans and beastkin, there's absolutely no way they could ever live in true harmony with those animals. The father points out that the Valkyrzan ducal house is the only noble family that regularly interacts with beastkin communities at the dangerous border regions. He reasons that for such an important family to travel all this way for a single beastkin means that creature is definitely no ordinary commoner. The father realizes with growing panic that if that mouse tells the Valkyrzan family everything that happened here today, both he and Alfred will be completely finished. He orders Alfred with deadly seriousness to erase every single trace of that creature's existence before anyone can discover what really happened. Meanwhile, Elodie stares at her transformed hands in complete amazement, asking what in the world has happened to her small mouse body. Cinderella asks with wonder if she's really Elodie, hardly believing that the tiny mouse has become this adorable girl with distinctive animal features. Cinderella exclaims Elodie's name with joy and immediately hugs her tightly, overwhelmed with happiness at seeing her friend in human form for the first time. Cinderella asks urgently if Elodie is okay and whether she has any injuries, broken bones, or other serious damage from the servant's violent attack. Elodie responds that no, she doesn't think she's seriously hurt, though she's still trying to understand what has happened to her body. Cinderella asks with amazement if she's really okay, pointing out that she was so badly hurt just moments ago and seemed near death. Cinderella exclaims with excitement about Elodie's new appearance, declaring that she's actually a beastkin just like the stories she's read about. Elodie jumps back in complete shock and asks if she really means that she's a beastkin, since she never knew this about herself. Elodie explains with confusion that she has been a tiny mouse her whole entire life and has never been human before in any way. Cinderella finds Elodie incredibly cute in her new form, with her distinctive mouse ears and tail that mark her as a harvest mouse beastkin. Cinderella explains that according to the books she's read, ordinary mice definitely can't turn into people like this, so there must be more to Elodie's story. She says that the books clearly state that beastkin have the ability to transform into animals, and they keep some animal traits even when in human form. Cinderella concludes with excitement that this means Elodie is definitely a harvest mouse beastkin, which is absolutely amazing and wonderful news. Elodie responds with disbelief that there's no way something this incredibly magical could possibly happen to someone like her. She wonders if this must all be just a dream, because such miraculous transformations don't happen to ordinary creatures like herself. Elodie admits that she's afraid it will all disappear in a moment like dreams do, and she's genuinely scared of losing this new form and returning to helplessness. Cinderella thinks to herself that she understands now Elodie has been living her entire life as a mouse but with a fully human mind and consciousness. Cinderella realizes that Elodie must have endured a world far more cruel than she can possibly imagine, facing constant danger and discrimination. She thinks that it's honestly a miracle that Elodie has managed to stay sane and kind through all the terrible experiences she must have faced. Cinderella hugs Elodie warmly and says with genuine affection that it's okay, and once they get out of this dangerous place, they can do all the things possible in a human body. Cinderella promises that they'll experience everything together, just the two of them, and that she knows it's confusing right now, but she'll help Elodie adjust. Cinderella declares with conviction that Elodie is her friend after all, and friends always help each other through difficult times like these. Alfred suddenly slams open the storage room door with violent force and announces that he found them hiding in here as ordered. Cinderella looks back in terror and stutters Alfred's name, completely shocked to see the trusted servant acting so aggressively toward them. Alfred declares that he's here just as the Count ordered him to be, and he begins loosening his tie as if preparing for some kind of physical confrontation. Cinderella asks with growing fear what Alfred is doing here and why he looks so threatening when he was always kind to her before. Alfred tells his accompanying thugs to seize that rat beastkin immediately and kill it without any hesitation or mercy whatsoever. Alfred warns that if they let the creature escape alive, they'll all die along with it, making the stakes of this mission absolutely clear. Cinderella desperately tells Elodie to run as fast as she can while there's still time to escape from this sudden deadly threat. Elodie thinks frantically to herself about what's happening here, wondering if she can really just abandon Sarah and run away to save herself. She realizes that they said rat beastkin, so they must be specifically after her rather than Cinderella, which means she's the real target. Elodie thinks that now that she knows how to transform into human form, turning back into a tiny mouse should be incredibly easy to accomplish. Elodie quickly changes her body back to mouse form and immediately hides in a narrow crack in the stone wall where humans can't reach her. The hired hunter curses angrily, saying damn it because the creature slipped into a crack in the wall where they can't grab it. The hunter calls it a damn filthy rat and orders his men to tear the entire wall apart stone by stone until they find and kill it. Elodie thinks to herself with growing horror that this isn't just a simple capture mission, this is actually a hunt where they're trying to murder her. She realizes that they're really trying to kill her this time, not just capture or relocate her to somewhere else safer. Cinderella cries out desperately for them to stop this violence, begging them not to destroy everything just to hurt one small creature. Elodie makes a defiant sound and thinks to herself that they really think she'll just let them kill her without any kind of fight or resistance. She remembers that Sarah promised she'd be with her always and that she would help her navigate this new life as a human. Elodie thinks with determination that she wants to be happy with Sarah and that she wants to make Sarah happy in return for all her kindness. She realizes that this is exactly why she can't afford to die here in this storage room, because she has promises to keep and a friend to protect. Alfred curses with frustration and orders his men to just kill the creature already, emphasizing that they need to hurry before anyone discovers what they're doing. Cinderella repeats that she told them to stop this senseless violence, asking why Alfred is doing this when he used to be trustworthy and kind. Suddenly, Edmund asks with calm authority what they are all doing over there, observing that they seem to be waging war against an innocent wall. Alfred responds with obvious terror, recognizing the young Duke Edmund Valkyrien and asking what brings such a noble person to this humble storage room. Edmund asks this question while Alfred is clearly terrified of being discovered in the middle of attempted murder by such an important witness. Cinderella, on the other hand, thinks to herself that Valkyrien is the family name that's famously friendly with Beast King communities throughout the kingdom. Cinderella realizes that in that case, these people might actually be able to help them escape from this terrible situation they've found themselves in. Cinderella calls out desperately to the young Duke, pleading with him to please help her because these people are trying to kill her innocent friend. Elodie peeks out from her hiding place as Cinderella continues sobbing, saying please help her with such genuine desperation that it breaks the heart. Cinderella begs the Duke to save them both from this violence, putting all her hope in this unexpected arrival that might be their salvation. Cinderella calls out desperately to Edmund with genuine fear in her trembling voice, begging him to please save her dear friend from the terrible danger she's currently facing. Alfred thinks frantically to himself that this absolutely cannot be happening right now, because if the young Duke notices what's really going on here, it will definitely be a complete disaster for everyone involved. Alfred realizes with growing panic that he needs to get rid of this troublesome girl immediately before the Duke sees too much and starts asking difficult questions that nobody wants to answer. Alfred roughly grabs Cinderella's delicate hand with his callous fingers and shouts at her with fake outrage, asking how she dares to raise her voice in such a prestigious place like this. Alfred demands to know if she even understands who that important person standing before them actually is, emphasizing the gravity of her supposed transgression against proper social etiquette. Alfred explains with exaggerated horror that the person she's addressing so casually is actually a noble heir of the incredibly prestigious Valkyrien family, one of the most powerful houses in the entire kingdom. Alfred declares with manufactured disgust that a lowly girl like her has absolutely no right to even speak directly to such an important noble person, let alone make demands of him. Alfred asks if she understands her terrible mistake while calling her a filthy maid, using the most insulting terms he can think of to diminish her status and credibility. Cinderella's heart drops like a stone as painful memories flood back to her, triggered by Alfred's cruel words that echo the abuse she's endured for so many years of her young life. She gets a vivid flashback of her stepmother's voice saying with venom that Cinderella doesn't even deserve to live in the attic, the worst room in their grand house. The memory continues with her stepmother declaring that with no real mother to protect her and the Count refusing to treat her as real family, she could never truly be a part of House Bluewood. Her stepmother's voice echoes in her mind, calling her nothing but a dirty soot girl and a vulgar, filthy maid who will never amount to anything worthwhile in this world. Cinderella's hand trembles violently as she says with desperate conviction that no, she's absolutely not just a maid, fighting against the years of psychological abuse that have shaped her self-image. Edmund intervenes with calm authority, saying that's quite enough of this inappropriate behavior as he firmly grabs Alfred's hand to stop his aggressive treatment of the girl. Alfred stutters nervously while addressing the young Duke, clearly terrified of having his actions scrutinized by someone with real power and influence in the kingdom. While Cinderella stares at Edmund with a mixture of hope and fear, Alfred quickly apologizes for causing any offense in front of the distinguished young Duke. Alfred explains dismissively that she's nothing but a low-born child who isn't even worth the Duke's valuable time or concern, so he'll remove her immediately from the premises. Edmund says with steel in his voice that Alfred should let go of the girl immediately, his tone making it clear that this is not a request but a direct command. Edmund squeezes Alfred's hand with surprising strength for someone so young, causing the servant to release Cinderella immediately out of genuine pain and shock. Alfred thinks to himself with amazement that it really hurts tremendously, wondering how a mere kid could possibly have this much physical strength in his small hands. Cinderella begins to speak, saying that the young Duke should know that she's actually someone important, but she gets cut off before she can finish her explanation. Edmund says her full name, Seraphina Bluewood, with a thoughtful expression as he considers the implications of what he's just heard from this mysterious girl. Edmund admits that this is definitely a name he has never heard before in any context, which strikes him as quite strange and suspicious given the circumstances. Edmund says that he has never once heard anyone mention a Lady Seraphina in connection with the Bluewood family, despite his knowledge of most noble households. Cinderella looks down sadly and says that it can't be possible that nobody knows her real name, her voice filled with the pain of being erased from her own family. Alfred laughs triumphantly and says that he knew it all along, because the head of the house has never once mentioned anyone named Seraphina to anyone in the kingdom. Cinderella responds with brave determination that it's still fine if Edmund doesn't believe her story about her identity, because that's not what really matters right now. She begs him to just please save her friend who is hiding desperately in the wall crevice, saying she doesn't care what happens to herself as long as her friend is safe. Cinderella explains that her friend is a field mouse beastkin, a young child who has just recently learned how to transform between her animal and human forms. She adds hopefully that if it's the Valkyrzin family helping them, they might actually be able to provide the assistance that her friend desperately needs to survive. Alfred freezes completely in terror as Cinderella continues speaking, realizing that she's revealing information that could destroy their entire cover-up plan. Alfred bursts out angrily, demanding to know how long she plans to spew complete nonsense in front of such an important person as the young Duke. Alfred tells Edmund not to waste his valuable time with this child's meaningless babbling, trying to discredit everything she's said about the situation. Edmund responds thoughtfully that actually, at least what she just said about the beastkin isn't a lie, which immediately changes the entire atmosphere in the room. The magical orb begins glowing brightly as Elodie asks herself with confusion what that strange, luminous orb could possibly be and why it's reacting to their conversation. Edmund explains that the place Cinderella described matches up perfectly with where they've been searching extensively for the missing lady they were sent to find. Cinderella questions with growing excitement whether the missing lady Edmund mentioned is really here in this very house, while Alfred becomes visibly scared. Cinderella's eyes light up with genuine joy as she thinks to herself that yes, the powerful Valkyrzin family has actually been looking for Elodie specifically. She thinks with tremendous relief that thank goodness they came when they did, because now there's real hope for her friend's safety and future happiness. Edmund announces that the magic orb is pointing directly at that specific crack in the wall where Cinderella said her friend was hiding from the violent servants. Alfred looks at the glowing orb with nervous dread, thinking to himself that the crack is exactly where that little rat creature ran and hid earlier during their hunt. Edmund grabs a heavy tool and walks purposefully toward Alfred, who immediately recognizes the serious threat that this young noble represents to their entire scheme. Alfred says desperately while obviously scared that they should wait, and that the young Duke should please hear him out because they can definitely resolve this peacefully. Edmund ignores Alfred's pleas completely and breaks through the solid wall with surprising ease instead of negotiating, causing Alfred to run off in complete terror. Edmund looks at the broken wall with satisfaction and smiles warmly as he says that he knew she was hiding in there all along, addressing her as Lady Ratsun. Elodie was so absolutely frightened by all the violence and shouting that she is completely frozen in place, unable to move or speak despite being discovered. She thinks to herself with amazement that this young man broke through a thick stone wall using just a simple fire poker, which seems almost impossible. Edmund kneels down and raises his hand gently as he tells Elodie not to worry about anything because he has come here specifically to rescue her from this terrible situation. Elodie remains too stunned to respond properly as she thinks frantically to herself about who this mysterious man could possibly be and why he wants to rescue her. Elodie quickly transforms back into her human form and immediately embraces Cinderella tightly, seeking comfort from the only person she truly trusts in this chaotic situation. Cinderella says with genuine anguish that she's so sorry she couldn't do anything meaningful when Elodie was in such terrible danger, asking why she's always so helpless. Elodie responds with fierce loyalty that Cinderella is absolutely okay and definitely not helpless at all, calling her Sarah with deep affection and respect. Elodie explains that she knew Cinderella would get in serious trouble and maybe even get hurt badly, but she still tried desperately to help despite the personal cost. Elodie asks what could possibly be brave about only stepping in to help when it's completely safe to do so, declaring that Cinderella is braver than anyone else. Cinderella tears up with overwhelming emotion at Elodie's kind words, finally feeling like someone truly understands her efforts and values her courage despite her limitations. Edmund hands Cinderella a clean cloth and tells her gently to wipe away her tears, showing unexpected kindness and consideration for her emotional state. Cinderella accepts the cloth gratefully and says thank you with genuine appreciation for this small act of compassion from someone she barely knows. Elodie thinks suspiciously to herself that this young duke better not be trying to flirt with her precious Sarah, because she won't tolerate any romantic interference. Elodie's jaw drops in shock as she realizes that Cinderella was simply embarrassed about crying in front of a boy her own age, not responding to romantic advances. Elodie thinks possessively to herself that while she's grateful Edmund helped them, he better stay far away from her beloved Sarah because she's protective of their friendship. Edmund suggests calmly that if Cinderella has calmed down sufficiently, they should head to the parlor because the Duke is waiting there to meet with them. Cinderella asks with confusion about which Duke he's referring to, since she's not familiar with all the important nobles who might be visiting their estate. Elodie thinks jealously to herself that Edmund is standing way too close to Cinderella, and she wants him to walk with much more distance between them. The stepmother says with exaggerated delight what an incredible honor it is to have such a distinguished and important guest visiting their humble estate today. She continues with fake enthusiasm that goodness gracious, the famous Duke Valkyrien has actually arrived at their home, and yet nobody bothered to inform her of this momentous occasion. The stepmother exclaims that if she had known about this prestigious visit in advance, she would have had her daughters prepare properly to greet such an important noble. The father glares at his wife intensely while thinking to himself that she needs to get a grip on herself immediately, because the Duke definitely didn't come here for social pleasantries. The father thinks with growing anxiety about how long it could possibly take to kill just one little rat, since the task seems so simple and straightforward. The father becomes increasingly nervous as he realizes that the report from Alfred should definitely be in by now, and he surely hopes they didn't mess up this crucial mission. The father turns his face toward the door and announces that someone is approaching, his voice filled with anticipation about finally receiving the news he's been waiting for. The Duke says with calm authority that they should let the newcomer enter immediately, since time is of the essence in this delicate situation. The father responds eagerly, telling someone to hurry and bring the visitor here right away because he's anxious to hear what happened with their important task. The father thinks hopefully to himself whether the job is finally completed successfully, allowing them to move forward with their cover-up plan without any complications. Edmund announces respectfully that he has brought Lady Ratson to meet with his grandfather, the Duke, as requested during their important mission to this estate. The father stands there in complete shock as the reality of the situation hits him like a physical blow, making him question everything he thought he knew. He thinks frantically to himself that the person he assumed was just a mere attendant is actually the young Duke of Valkyrien, one of the most powerful people in the kingdom. The father realizes with growing horror that beside Edmund are Sarah and some little creature that he now suspects might be the rat they tried to kill. He wonders with mounting panic whether that young Duke knows that they attempted to murder what was apparently a beast-kin child rather than just a common pest. The father thinks desperately that if they can somehow deceive the Duke's perceptive eyes, they might still be able to cover up this massive mistake and save themselves. The father addresses Cinderella with fake enthusiasm, asking if she heroically rescued Lady Ratson from some terrible fate that befell the distinguished visitor. He thinks to himself that it would be much better to have Sarah play along with this narrative and pretend that she saved the beastkin rather than the truth. The father tells Cinderella that she did an excellent job and promises to reward her generously later, while telling her to leave the young lady with them and go away. Cinderella responds with confusion, asking what exactly he means by this strange request, since she doesn't understand why she should abandon her friend. Elodie tries to warn the father not to dare touch Sarah, calling him a sniveling rat in her thoughts while recognizing the danger that Cinderella faces. Elodie thinks to herself that she can see right through his transparent scheme to get rid of Sarah where the Duke won't witness what happens to her. She realizes that the father plans to intimidate and possibly harm Cinderella to ensure her silence about everything that really happened here today. The father insists that Cinderella should bring the young lady over to him immediately, trying to maintain control of the situation despite the growing complications. Elodie thinks defiantly to herself that if he seriously believes she'll just sit back and let him harm Sarah, he's about to discover how wrong he is. Elodie declares mentally that if the father sees her as just some ordinary, helpless child, he's going to regret that assumption very quickly and painfully. Elodie bites down hard on the father's finger with all the strength she can muster, causing him to scream in genuine pain and surprise at her fierce resistance. The father yells that it hurts terribly and calls Elodie a crazy rat, declaring that they should have killed her from the very start of this whole mess. The father suddenly covers his mouth in horror as he realizes that he just admitted to attempted murder in front of the most powerful witnesses possible. Edmund asks with dangerous calm whether the father actually ordered a servant to kill the young lady, his voice carrying the weight of serious legal implications. The stepmother asks her husband with confusion what this admission means, clearly not understanding the full scope of what they've gotten themselves into. The father stutters desperately and denies ever giving such a murderous order, claiming that if anything happened, it was entirely the servant's independent action. He insists frantically that the attempted killing has absolutely nothing to do with him personally, trying to distance himself from the criminal conspiracy. Elodie calls him a liar in her mind, knowing perfectly well that he was the one who orchestrated the entire plan to eliminate her. The Duke says with cold satisfaction that he plans to deny everything until the very end, which is exactly what he expected from someone like the Count. The Duke explains that he has suspected the father from the very beginning of this investigation, but his blockhead grandson begged him to reconsider the evidence. The Duke says that Edmund insisted that perhaps the father was being falsely accused of crimes he didn't commit, showing mercy that may have been misplaced. The Duke tells everyone to take a close look at the evidence he's about to present, which will definitively prove what really happened in this house. A voice announces that the evidence is ready, just as the Duke predicted it would be, confirming all of his suspicions about the Bluewood family's crimes. The father realizes with growing terror that the voice belongs to Alfred, who is apparently still alive and able to testify against them. Alfred's recorded voice clearly states that they should capture that rat beastkin and kill it immediately without any hesitation or mercy whatsoever. Another voice responds that the creature slipped into a crack in the wall, calling it cursed vermin that needs to be eliminated at all costs. Alfred's voice continues urgently, saying they need to hurry up and kill the creature before they get caught in the act by someone with authority. Cinderella's voice can be heard telling them to stop their violence, providing clear evidence that she witnessed and opposed their criminal actions. The Duke explains that if someone wears a magical earring on one side, they can hear every single conversation exchanged within a certain radius. The Duke thinks to himself with grim satisfaction that while the father thought he only had to worry about the Duke himself, the truth is that they knew everything from the start.